Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Natasha Doye, and this is workshop number 2. This is a workshop that's specifically going over the narrative portion of the application for the System Demonstration Grant Homelessness Prevention Services funding for by and for organizations. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm with the Office of Community and Homeless Services in the Snohomish County Human Services Department. And then my coworker Sam is also here. Sam, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. It's Sam Scoville, Supervisor of the Office of Community and Homeless Services with Natasha. Thank you for being here.
And today we're going to go over a basic funding overview, just kind of reiterating some information that we've already shared in some past workshops, but doing so with kind of a big picture lens. And then I'll go over the application, specifically important things to note and important things to keep in mind. And then we'll go over the narrative portion of the application. So feel free to unmute and ask questions, put questions in the chat, whatever way is most comfortable for you. So starting off, talking a little bit about homelessness prevention and what it means, and the funding source. So our System Demonstration Grant Homelessness Prevention funding is split into 3 separate sections. So there's funding for the general population, there's funding for young adults, and those 2 pieces were part of a separate RFP that was released earlier this year. And then the 3rd piece is the by and for organization funding. The by and for funding is intended to go to organizations that are serving populations that may not otherwise access these homelessness prevention services. And the point is to specifically prevent folks from experiencing homelessness in the first place. So to either help them maintain their current housing or obtain housing somewhere else. And the goal is to serve people at the highest risk of experiencing homelessness. For example, someone who has received an eviction notice. And the funds cover housing-focused case management, temporary rent payments, utility payments, arrears or past due payments, application fees, first and last, and safety deposit for a new place. And then to talk a little bit about by and for and what by and for means. So the System Demonstration Grant combines state homeless resources into a single grant opportunity to county governments under the administration of the Washington State Department of Commerce. And the Department of Commerce requires that at least 10% of the homelessness prevention funds go to what they call by and for organizations. In Snohomish County, we decided to dedicate 15% of the total funds to by and for organizations. And the Department of Commerce defines by and for organizations as organizations that are operated by and for the community they serve. Their primary mission and history is serving a specific community, and they are culturally based, directed, and substantially controlled by individuals from the population they serve. At the core of their programs, the organizations embody the community's central cultural values. These communities may include ethnic and racial minorities, immigrants and refugees, individuals who identify as LGBTQ+, individuals with disabilities or who are deaf, and Native Americans. And then as far as the application is concerned, one of the first things I wanted to touch on was what we call threshold criteria. So in order for an application to be considered for this funding, it must meet the following threshold criteria. The first one is that the application has to be submitted on time. The second is the application has to be complete, so all the required materials have to be included. The third is that the project that is proposed is eligible for this RFP. So that means that it needs to be, a homelessness prevention project. And the fourth piece, which is specific to this funding, is that the organization applying for this funding needs to be considered a by and for organization as per the Commerce definition. So I'm going to go into those a little bit more in depth. As far as turning the application in on time, the deadline for the application is 4 p.m. on Tuesday, the 6th of June. So applications can be turned in either electronically, sent via email, which is a preferred method. If you're unable to turn in the application electronically, they can be mailed to our office, and they can also be delivered in person. We highly recommend electronic. It's easier to track, and it's also easier to know that it's been received. And then as far as the piece about making sure that it's complete, so there are required materials. And as far as the required materials from the application itself, you need the application cover sheet, which is section 1, and that has to be completed and signed. And then the narrative portion, which are sections 2 through 5, those need to be completed. And then the last piece is the budget workbook. So that's the budget Excel document. It's got 3 different pages. So you have to make sure that all of those 3 pieces are completed. And then as far as additional materials, and all this information is in the RFP. So if you need to reference it, you can find it in the RFP in the application. You can also find this information on our website, on the By and For organization website. These slides will be uploaded probably by early next week, so you should have all this information. The additional technical materials would be, if you plan on subcontracting a portion of this grant with another organization, you would need a memorandum of understanding, or a MOU. All nonprofits will need to provide their agency certification for nonprofit status. And then if you haven't contracted with the county yet, or if you haven't contracted in the last year, then we would need an electronic copy of your agency's most recent audited financial statements. And then also a current organizational chart. So that would include the project staff. So staff that would be working on the specific project that this funding would be covering, and then whoever would be managing that staff. And then this is quite a bit of text, but I think it's really important. It's part of the instructions for the application. And I think that saying them out loud and reading them can be beneficial. So there's some really important pieces that I will definitely emphasize. So first, submit 1 copy of the completed application, including the budget, and the original application must be signed. They can be signed electronically if they're turned in electronically. All budgets and forms are in the prescribed format. So when you download them, keep them in Excel and Word so that you can fill them out correctly. And then 11-point font for the narrative questions and a 10-point font for the budget workbook. Make sure to answer each question fully to the best of your ability. And the information that you provide in the narrative should be written as though the person reading it has no idea about your organization, does not know any of the services you provide, the programs that you have, or any information about the services that you provide to the community. The people who will be reading your application and scoring your application are part of a project review committee. And the project review committee doesn't necessarily know about all the organizations in Snohomish County that do this work. The project review committee is community members. So they could be community members with lived expertise. It could be community members that work at other organizations. They could be community members that work in a completely unrelated field, but know a little bit about this information. So do your best to be as, succinct as possible, but also explain in a way that people who don't know your organization could understand what your organization does. Make sure to only include the technical materials that are required. So don't attach or send any cover letters or annual reports or brochures or letters of support, because those are not going to be referenced or looked at. And all application pages and the budget and all forms that are turned in should have the project agency name in the footer, just so we can make sure that we have all of your information. So I did touch on this briefly, but as far as the review and decision-making process, staff will review and assess the applications. So this includes the threshold review. And then also there will be certain questions and pieces of the narrative that staff, which would be people who work in the Office of Community and Homeless Services with myself and Sam, would be reviewing. And then also the budget. The budget's not something that we're going to ask the PRC to review. So that's something that we would be reviewing. The Project Review Committee, or PRC, like I said, is made up of community members, and they're going to be the ones who will be assessing and ranking and scoring the applications. So this process is a competitive competitive application process. So there are going to be scoring criteria, they're going to be objective, and the highest scoring application will most likely be the applications that get funded. It's not always the case. The PRC has the ability to make recommendations as to what they think will be best, but most of the time that's kind of the way that it tends to go. So keep that in mind to fill out the application to your best ability and as fully and completely as possible. And then the PRC will send their recommendations to the Human Services Department Director, and the Human Services Department Director will be the one that makes the final decision on who's funded. So I know I went through a lot of information right there, and I went through it really fast. So does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Yes, I think I have fragments of questions here and there. So to begin with, I wanna ask, I know you said 15% of the funding was allocated for buy-in for organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how they reach at this. They are the people that are mostly affected in terms of housing and low income. I was wondering that this probably could have been, the threshold could have been probably higher than 15%, maybe to even have 50% or 25%. So can you tell us how the 15% was arrived at?
Yes. So with our team at the Human Services Department in the Office of Community and Homeless Services, most of our contracts that we have are with larger nonprofit organizations. And so this funding for buy-in for organizations is specifically for smaller organizations in Snohomish County that we don't currently contract with. The Washington State Department of Commerce required that we put at least 10%, and that's specifically for those buy-in for organizations, those smaller organizations. As an example, with the emergency rental assistance, the way that we did the funding, the way that we had the funding go to the buy-in for organizations is that the organization that received the award subcontracted with buy and for organizations and had those buy and for organizations refer clients to them. And instead of doing it that way with a subcontracting and then referring, we wanted to actually give the buy and for organizations the funding so that they can make those payments themselves for clients. And so the requirement was 10%. In Snohomish County, we decided to go 15% instead of 10%. It might change. This is a 2-year funding cycle. And so the amount that we have this year could be different from the amount we have the next year. And we want to see how this goes right now and this process goes. I mean, ideally, we would like to increase that amount in the future, but we don't know how or when that'll happen. And we do agree that, you know, smaller organizations do need to have funding in order to grow and build capacity. And so the 15% right now is just a starting point. Another piece that I think is important too is that anyone that is in your community that you support, say that your organization wins the funds for buy and for organization funding, and you spend your budgeted amount for like a month, you could refer your clients to the organization that handles the general population. So there's no reason that your clients can't also be served by the general population organization. The only difference is that that organization has more restrictions. So you would have to go through 211, and you would have to meet stricter eligibility criteria. And it's not something where we would want, you know, double funding. So they wouldn't get funds from your organization and then like also get funds in the same month from the general population funding. Since it is required to be entered in HMIS, I think there's going to be some tracking going on there. So that's going to be beneficial. But our goal is to see how this goes, since this is a first time for us. And then hopefully continue doing it in the future and hopefully with additional funding.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very good response. And thank you for really moving the percentage from 10 to 15. That was a good movie that you did. We appreciate that. And also thank you very much for really giving the funding directly to the buyer and for instead of passing through a middleman. I think that was good, because if you give them the money, I mean, we can do this. We don't need anybody else to help us do it. If you give it to the people that these funds are for here for, then I think that's direct assistance. And I think that and also bumping up from 10 to 15% was very good. So thank you and your team for doing that. We appreciate that. I'm just going to put all these pieces of questions together, and you probably can just answer them in one paragraph or whatever, because I've been taking notes here and there. You mentioned about a project review committee, and you say this is people from the community. I'm trying to, I just want to, can you explain who these people are typically? When you say members of the community, are these the businessman that run the gas station, or is this the person that works in a nursing home? Who are these members of the community that comprise this project review committee?
Yes, that's a really good question. So most of the time, I would say, and Sam, I'm going to invite you to come in and add additional information, because I am new. I started at the county in January, and this is my first grant that I'm working on managing. But I would say that it seems to be the case that most of the time, the people who tend to volunteer their time on the project review committee are somehow connected to the homeless housing and services system in some way or another. So it's either folks that are on boards, such as the Partnership to End Homelessness or the Racial Equity Advisory Board, or it's people who work for other nonprofit organizations that don't have a conflict of interest. So we do try to reach out to people who have some kind of background in this work. And a lot of times what we hope is that we also get people with lived expertise or lived experience who can really speak to, their experience and what they would like to see happen. Do you have anything to add, Sam?
No, I think that was a good response. They tend to be people who have a basic understanding around, either homelessness or have worked in it or have, a little bit of an understanding of the housing system. And like Natasha said, where they don't have a conflict of interest, meaning they're not applying for the funds or they wouldn't benefit from these funds. We're looking for someone who's going to be objective in reviewing these applications.
Yeah, the only comment that I have about that is that, these would be people that know, let's say, for example, you're representing a buy-in for organization, a buy-in for organization, a poor, marginalized, undocumented immigrant in the community, and you're trying to review and approve a project that's been applied on their behalf, and you don't even know what kind of circumstances, you don't even know their circumstances, you don't even know what kind of problems they go through, you don't know what their problems are. I'm wondering, I'm really wondering whether they will have the enough knowledge or the information they need to say, well, this grant need to be approved, this one doesn't need to be approved. Because if I talk about people that live in my community who are mostly illegal immigrants, who don't have jobs, who have all these problems, who are racially discriminated, who are poor, and I put a project for them for you guys to approve it so I can help them. And somebody that works somewhere who doesn't even know anything about poverty, who doesn't even know anything about immigrants and refugees to decide whether my project proposal will be approved or denied, I think that's kind of, for me, that's kind of very complex. Does this make sense?
That does make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like Pa is joining us, which is great as well. We do our best to get people, like Natasha said, that have the understanding and that background and even the knowledge of, what homelessness has looked like within, or the barriers, right? For those, even, coming to some of the Buy For organizations who are out there doing that. We definitely will be reaching out also to our Racial Equity Advisory Board, those members who, many who are operating Buy For organizations that may not be applying for this. So, that piece might be a little bit tricky. But we try and do our best to make sure that there's an understanding and an objectivity in them coming and being on this panel.
Okay. Thank you. That would help.
Hi,
I appreciate
Sam.
that. I
Hi, Pa.
appreciate the response.
Natasha, how you guys doing?
Good.
Excellent.
How are
Nice
you,
to see
Pa?
you here.
I'm calling in from Senegal. I'm all the way in Africa.
There's no delay.
I just checked
That's
in
good.
with I just checked in with Fasiri, and he's like, oh, me and Momodo are on a meeting with the county, and I said, let me just hop in to say hello, and
Excellent.
I have no doubt that you are handling it well. I'm in Senegal.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, there's no delay. It's as if you're right here in Everett or Linwood. So I hope things are going. I hope things are going well for you in Senegal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can see at least on our end.
Go back to two. Okay. Can you see that on my screen, the application timeline?
Mhm.
Okay. So the application is due Tuesday, June 6th by 4 p.m. And then the review process will go the month of June. So we hope to notify applicants of the funding late June to early July. And then our goal is for contracts to begin as of August 1st. So
Okay.
it should be a pretty quick turnaround, we're hoping.
By August, okay. Just out of curiosity, is it the same where is it gonna be reimbursement based where I mean we implement and later get the money, implement and bill for it?
Oh, yes. So that's also something that we've talked about. So, as far as the invoicing goes, we will have you, perform the activities and then invoice us to reimburse you for those activities. We do realize that it is a barrier, especially for smaller organizations that may not have the funds to be able to cover the first month or two of services, that we will work with you, and we have talked about some possible solutions. So that is something that, if you are awarded the funding, that we will work with you on to make sure that you're able to provide those services.
Well, that's one of the biggest challenges. Today is the 16th. Yesterday, the 15th, we had 3 reports that were due, contracts, government contracts we had. And of course, as part of our reporting process, those were the big things that we highlighted, bolded, put in red, underlined, italics, and all of that. It's the biggest challenge. I shared with Momodu and Kwasiri right before I left when I was in New York that at the end of this month, I may not even be able to pay salaries because of things like that. Because I have $180,000 or $190,000 that is out there, things we have delivered, and government process is so slow, I may not be able to pay salaries if that money didn't come. Thank God the check came in yesterday, and I had to tell me to go and deposit that so that we can. One of the checks came yesterday, but I was already nervous that end of month I may not be able to pay salaries. So as part of the feedback, we definitely will continue to engage government to try to factor that. It's still one of the biggest barriers we have when it comes to our access to funding and the like, because if we don't have the money, we cannot just implement. And if we have to implement and invoice, certainly it's a big barrier in a nutshell. And we would really love you guys to continue. The conversation is still going to continue. I know I've raised it, we've raised it multiple times, but we will continue to raise it because it continues to be our biggest barrier after we access the funding.
Yes, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing it up. And I appreciate you bringing it up multiple times because it is one of the biggest barriers. And if we want to continue to fund organizations like yours and like other really great nonprofits, I think that we need to figure out a system in a way that that won't be a barrier anymore.
Thank you.
All right, so I want to just go to the next slide with the contact information, just so you have it and it's available to you. The next portion of what I was thinking about doing, which I'll probably do briefly, is I'm going to share the application itself and just go over a couple things on the narrative portion just to point out, so that hopefully it helps anyone who may have some issues as they're starting to fill out the narrative portion. So there's my email address, the website. Please reach out if you have any questions. If you would like to set up a one-on-one conversation, I'm here and available for that. And please reach out sooner rather than later. Another quick plug is that the application workshop next Tuesday will be going over the budget and the budget portion of the application. So that's going to have some really good information. So please come in and tune in next Tuesday, the 23rd at 3 o'clock. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing the presentation and I'm going to share the application. Okay.
Just while you do the question, is this was this a customized one-on-one meeting with Wawak and you guys? I mean, out of a bit, or was it open to everyone and only Wawak showed up? Which is which?
It's the second one.
Oh,
It was open to everyone, but Wawak showed up in force.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, don't give them the
I
money.
only
Keep
saw
it
my
all of them.
You
I
should be
only saw my
proud.
team and I
Yeah.
don't see anyone else. I'm like, okay.
You're
Modu, did
getting
you facilitate this meeting in my absence? Or
one-on-one technical
facilitate?
assistance. Yeah.
I did. Natasha, before you go into the body of the application,
Hmm.
do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure, please.
Yeah, I seem to miss one thing you talked about in one of the slides. I think I was a little distracted before I came back to myself. You wrapped up. You talked about the audit, and you also talked about I think you talked about the organization chart. Can
Yes.
you explain? Can you explain those two a little bit?
Sam, would you
Sure.
mind explaining those a little bit more? And
Yeah.
I will
I just
bring
missed
the
it.
slide.
Sure. So the audit, many of our organizations who receive funding through the county, they're audited, right? They have an independent auditor that comes and takes a look at their finances and their operations to make sure that they comply with the standards. And then they then provide a report back to the organization. Sometimes some of the smaller organizations don't have an annual audit, so we'll have to take a look at that. And I'm not sure, Natasha, where that fits in or if that discussion has been had. I'm assuming that we could have that discussion and figure out how we could move forward if there has not been an audit. And then the organization chart is really what do positions look like within the organization, right? So you've got a board, and then the CEO or the executive director reports to the board, and underneath the executive director, right, you might have then almost looks like a triangular chart where then it gets down to staff and who's doing the direct services. And so they have a lot of sort of the staff doing the work at the bottom, and then as you work your way up, you see what the structure looks like for the organization.
Yeah, we actually do have that. I've seen it in the
Okay.
record somewhere. I went through I went through the entire application. I read every question. I went through everything so I can prepare myself for the meeting if I have any questions. I did not. I only have that line that I highlighted, which I forgot what it was, but Natasha and I will talk about it. But I haven't seen any question that ask about the organization chart. Is this in the question or this is an appendix? So, because I haven't seen a question about it. So, if you could just clarify that.
Yeah, it's an additional an add-on, an additional material that you will attach to if you are turning it in electronically.
Okay.
You'll attach it to the email. If you're turning in a physical packet of information, you'll print it out and put it in the packet of information. So yes, it's not part of the actual narrative of the application. It's an additional piece that we're asking for.
But I think you might find that
Is that just
language.
the organization chart or the
Yeah.
the,
Organization chart,
the
yeah.
audit is included? Is that both? Do we have to have an audit or just the organizational chart?
Well, I want to take that question back. Natasha, if that wasn't discussed, we'll have to figure out what that looks like. I don't think that means that you can't apply. We'll get back to you. That's one of the questions. We'll make sure that response is posted to the website. If you have had a fiscal audit in the last year, that's what you would attach and submit with your application. And I think you'll find that language really at the top of the application, right? Maybe where it starts to talk about, how to complete the application, what we're looking for. And I think that's where you'll find that language of, submitting your organizational chart and your most recent audit.
So is it just most recent financial statement? Or an audit? Because for grants we have applied, we've submitted our 990s. They've asked for our P&L, our profit and loss, our financials. All those we have provided all of those things, but we've definitely not have an audit.
Okay.
Yet.
Okay, I'm going to get back to I probably at the minimum, right? If you don't have an audit, my guess is we might want to look at those financial statements. But yeah, please give us an opportunity to go back and figure out what we'd want submitted if you don't have an audit, a recent audit, or an audit.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
Sorry for keeping you guys or taking you back. I'm glad
No,
Momo to ask that question, because these applications can be very rigorous, and the last thing we may want to do is spend all the time, energy, and effort to fill out the application. As you can see, both Momodu and Fasiri are on the line. I normally would have 3-4 people, or sometimes the whole office, working on these applications, as this person work on the finance, this person this. So we can take a whole week or two just working on this gathering stuff. And it's definitely not for our advantage for us to cease direct operations and serving the community to be filling out an application that would end up being rejected or denied because of one piece of paper that we don't have. And still, as we talk about the barriers, those are some of the challenges that we still have or that continue to exist.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we will hop on that fast, right? So that you have some idea.
Yeah, I think this is similar to what I talked about earlier. I think they might need to relax some of the strings, because if you really try to target buy-in for poor, marginalized organizations that help immigrants and refugees, and you have some of these very strong strings that they must satisfy before they get the money to help the poor people, I think that's a very big impediment. I think we need to probably look at it. It may not be you, it may be a process in the system that you don't even have control over. But I think some of these these ones and twos of things that can prevent people from getting the funding to help people that really needs this, I think need to be really looked at. And I think I will really kind of beg that this shouldn't prevent us and other people that have written very good proposals and are very qualified and have people that need this funding to help improve their quality of life, not to get it because of something that we can probably walk around, not in a wrong way, but something that we can try to find other solution around it. So having said that, I wanted to ask also one more question. In addition to that, we probably will just answer all that at once. We have not actually talked about, maybe it's in the next workshop, which is the third one, any reporting requirements, because that's also is very important. You get a grant sometimes, the reporting alone is more difficult than even writing and getting approved for the grant. So I think if this is going to be discussed in the next workshop, that's okay. You can just wait until then. But if not, can you talk about this? Just run through it very, very briefly. Let's see what we are looking for, because sometimes these reporting requirements are more difficult than even trying to bid for the grant itself. So I don't know.
Yes, yeah. So our previous workshop, the first application workshop, we did talk about like contracting requirements and the different requirements for contracting with the county, and the different steps that you'll have to go through for that. In the information session, we talked a little bit more about like invoicing and what that would look like, and then also kind of mentioned the different eligibility criteria for clients that you serve. So as far as reporting requirements go, there are going to be some forms that will need to be filled out for the community members that you serve. And then there's also going to be, you'll have to enter information into HMIS. So that will be part of it. And we don't have the exact specific paperwork right now. That is something that we're kind of working on with, I had mentioned before, the emergency rental assistance. So they use specific documentation, and we're going to look at that documentation and see if that would be beneficial for this funding as well. And like I mentioned, the general population and the young adult population, they have stricter eligibility requirements, and they have a little bit stricter requirements for their funding. And so theirs might look a little bit different than ours, but they're going to be somewhat similar. So I'm sorry that I don't have a full answer for you. Part of that is that we are working on it.
So Natasha,
You did try.
for both of you, I have time and time over the years, especially some engage you and highlighted these things. And honestly, all the time, you will all acknowledge and agree that yes, true, these barriers exist. But honestly, the process is slow. If acknowledgement is done, how are we making sure that things have changed? I mean, to the better or improve? We just got rejected or rejected for the cultural grant by the county, by the way. Something that we spent so much time to put together. I mean, we just got refused or rejected last week after putting in so much efforts and time. So it can be very frustrating. Community needs us every single second to serve them. There are so many issues happening in the community, from deaths to people being arrested and detained by immigration, legal issues, health issues, outreach. We have so many things to work on, and we have to spend so much time chasing these grants and also trying to fulfill the requirements. I said until yesterday, all of us, like, our pressures were very high the past 2 weeks because we had 3 grants whose reports were due on the same day. And we had to really focus on putting those together. Everybody was at work. As soon as we finished that, we have to come back to this. Some of them were quarterly, or annual or end of the grant report. So it can be very tedious. I don't know. And sometimes the money is not even, all that. I don't know. How much can an organization have for this buy and for? What's the maximum amount per organization? I know I've seen the lump sum, but how much is the maximum that an organization can be awarded for this buy and for?
So for the amount that's awarded, we don't really know. The way that we are doing this funding is that we are asking each organization that applies to apply for as much funding as they believe they need for the program. And then the project review committee will make recommendations for which organizations are funded and if they're funded fully or if they're funded partially. So whoever applies for this funding could theoretically apply for up to the full amount, but the intention is that multiple organizations would be funded. So most likely there wouldn't be one organization that receives all of the funding. So sorry, I also don't have a full answer for that one, but it's for as much as you believe that your organization has the capacity to spend on this program. And
So
that
now I was just going to highlight something, that one of the challenges we have faced in the past when we were partially funded was the funders determining what to fund on our budget. That puts us in a very funny situation. For example, we ask you for $10,000 and put 5 line items in the budget. You approve 3 and you select those 3. Given an example, we ask for a vehicle, a driver, and insurance. You give us insurance and reject the vehicle and the driver position. What are we going to need insurance for if we don't have a vehicle and a driver? So hopefully this one wouldn't be like that, where you all would pick part of the budget and leave us in a funny situation to say, this is what we can fund. because those still remain barriers for us. If you give us money and you select what you want. So hopefully if we ask for 10,000, you give us 2,000, you will say, submit a new budget or decide what is important to you instead of you choosing for us what you think would be beneficial. I thought I should just bring that to you guys' attention. I'm not sure, I mean, if it is helpful or not, but we have had those, challenges in the past. This grant is very important. That's why I've reminded Momodu and Faziri board I was gonna apply for the general population before they came on board. And as soon as they came in, I've been telling them about this one over and over because there's a need for it. And we didn't apply for the general population. We waited for this.
I think that some of that is, we don't know how many other organizations are going to apply as well. Certainly that is taken into account. And I think one of the questions, and we can address it here. I think one of the questions is, is this project scalable, right? And that's taken into account as well. And if it's not, that's all, which, I think is a good question, is all that needs to come to the project review committee to take into account.
Okay.
So do know my guess is, it's quite possible that we'd get applications for more than the amount that we have to award. And so somewhere, difficult decisions might need to be made.
I mean, it's not about, for me, even if you make the difficult decision and say, we don't have the money to give you 100% of what you ask for, but we will give you 5, 10, 15, or 20, or 30, or 50%. Let us decide what we are going to use your award, the 50% for. Not you picking and choosing some items that you think you can fund, leaving us with a gap. Because everything we ask for are things that we think are necessary for us to successfully implement the project. Now, if any of those don't exist, it can be challenging. Maybe we have other ways of getting what you want us to use the money for, but the other essential services you deny. And I've given a typical example of a driver and a vehicle. If you give me a driver and I don't have a vehicle for the driver to drive, how will that work? Those type of things are the ones I'm saying that give us and say, okay, here it is. You want to review your budget? We can give you 10,000. You ask for 300, we can give you 10,000. What do you want to use this 10,000 for on your budget? And we will submit a new budget if that is possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. And next week, I think that's good timing as well, because I think next week Natasha is going to meet and go over the budget, right? And what that could look like, what can be submitted, what's sort of allowable. But I think specifically these funds, we're trying to provide as much flexibility as possible for you, to be able to build out a budget in a way that can meet the needs of those that you're working with.
Right. I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe last question. I know we've been over the time. It was 3 to 4 o'clock.
You're good.
I think
You're good.
Simon, one of you talked about the HMIS, and when I went through all the lines in the application, I didn't see any. Well, I saw the language about HMIS, but I haven't seen the actual thing itself, whatever you call thing. Is it something that's going to be provided later, or is it something that's going to be uploaded? Because I haven't seen any HMIS portal or anything that people are required to put in the information that we are supposed to.
Yes, yeah. So the HMIS, Debbie went over some of that information, I think probably most fully in the information session. So if you have the chance to check that out, there's some PowerPoint slides that she has specifically about HMIS. And HMIS will be, it's a web-based platform, so it's no additional cost to the organization. And you'll be able to bill the time that the staff member spends entering that information into HMIS to this grant. So that'll be included in the grant. And there's some basic information that is going to be captured and entered into HMIS. I believe that there is examples of that language in the slides for the information session. And if not, then it might be in the slides for our last application workshop, which was last Thursday, the application workshop 1 with general information. But it is something that we can go over a little bit more fully. There is an agreement that you will have with our HMIS team. So there's a whole team at the county that works on the HMIS, and they will do training and support you in understanding how to enter this information and what information needs to be entered. And you'll actually sign an agreement with us for the HMIS services. So there will be like additional training for your staff who will be doing that.
Yeah, Momodu, that's something very similar. Other government grants we have, each of them have their own system. I mean, Ogwe uses, for example, InfoPass, InfoNet, and I mean, other SOA had their own. All the other government institutions we work with have a system, and it's not hard. So we'll be able to figure that out when we get there.
And we'd be able to provide that training as well, so you know how to use that. I did drop in the chat. You should be able to access it in the web page for the specific RFP for the Buy For organizations. And within that, I know Natasha has worked to get. Do we have, Natasha? Have we posted the recordings?
We have posted the recording for the information session.
Okay.
The recording for the application workshop last Thursday, as of today, had not been uploaded, but will hopefully be uploaded in the next few days.
Perfect.
Website, right?
Oh, sorry. Say that one more time.
Uploaded on the website.
Yes,
Yep.
on the Buy For organization website. And I know that the PowerPoint slides are up there. So those are already on the website for our workshop last Thursday, the general workshop. So you can definitely look at the slides. The recording will be up hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Any additional questions?
Well, this one is just out of human curiosity. It's really
Okay.
not something you have to worry about too much. If you don't want to answer it, you can say, go away. I don't have time for this. I keep seeing, and you mentioned system demonstration, system demonstration grant?
Yes.
System demonstration grant, right? SDG?
Yep.
And I'm wondering, I mean, what is it? I mean, why is it called that? It's just curiosity. You can say, I'm not.
Yeah, it's just honestly, it's just the funding type that comes through commerce, right? These are commerce dollars, and just kind of at a high level, these funding sources are meant for homelessness housing, right? Homelessness housing and services, and it's probably the easiest answer. It's something commerce named it. I can't explain to them. Yeah,
no problem.
Yeah,
I'll take it. I'll take that.
It used to be just consolidated homeless grant, and then for a handful of organizations sort of systems that had created performance measurements or metrics for their own system, they then began to award them SDG dollars, system demonstration grant dollars.
Yeah, no problem.
Yep.
Just
I'd lose no
curious.
sleep over that.
Nobody's in trouble. It's okay.
And there will
Any-
be no quiz on that either.
Right, exactly.
All the acronyms.
Maybe that, yeah. SDG.
All right, any other questions? No? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.